What are the invisible labels you silently use to dictate your own potential? We often live within boundaries we didn't choose, accepting them as permanent limits on what we can achieve. This is the passive trap. It occurs when you look at your current societal or economic limitations and accept them as unchangeable facts of life, rather than temporary circumstances. Take the example of a man who lived at a local train station. His entire existence was a repetitive loop of asking travelers for alms, operating on the belief that he had nothing to offer the world except his own need. Operating purely as a receiver creates a ceiling on your life. When you rely entirely on the charity of others, you surrender your agency and cap your capacity for growth at whatever someone else is willing to spare. One day, a businessman in a tailored suit arrived at the platform. The beggar approached him, expecting a large handout based on the man's apparent wealth. The businessman didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he stated his own rule for living. He was a merchant who believed in transactions. He told the beggar he would only give something if he received value in return. This refusal challenged the man's baseline assumption. He had viewed his poverty as an exemption from the rules of trade. But he was now confronted with the logic of a merchant who saw him as a potential partner, who simply had an empty inventory. Participation in any economy requires an offering. To move from dependency to success, you must find a way to provide value, regardless of how little capital you have when you start. After 2 days of reflecting on that encounter, the man noticed wildflowers growing near the tracks. They were untended, free, and available to anyone willing to pick them. He began a small experiment. He gathered these zero-cost flowers and handed one to every person who gave him a coin. The response was immediate. His daily income began to rise as people reacted to the gesture. He continued until he ran out of flowers each day, finding that his earnings were tied directly to his inventory. The presence of the flowers changed the nature of the interaction. Passengers began paying for the asset in his hand, transforming a simple request for help into a functional marketplace. By introducing a marginal, zero-cost asset, the man shifted the dynamic of his environment. He was no longer relying on charity. He was engaging in commerce. Eventually, the same businessman returned to the station. This time, the man didn't just ask for money, he offered a flower as a professional exchange. The businessman accepted the flower and paid him, but then added a vital observation. He told the man that by providing a product for a price, he had become a fellow merchant. This interaction changed the man's self-perception. He realized his flowers were not a gimmick for attracting pity, but the foundation of a real commercial business. He accepted a new definition of himself. He stood on the platform and shouted his new identity to the sky. Then he walked away from the station and permanently abandoned his post. A new strategy can lead to temporary gains, but the man's permanent change occurred when he discarded his old identity. He left the station because he no longer belonged to the category of people who stayed there. 6 months later, 2 well-dressed men met on a train. One was the businessman, the other was the former beggar, now unrecognizable in a suit of his own. The man explained that he had used his station earnings to buy bulk inventory and had become a successful wholesale flower merchant, traveling now to expand his operations. He realized that the world had started treating him as a businessman the moment he offered the first flower, but he hadn't seen the results until he stopped thinking like a beggar. This graph shows how reality often shifts before our internal perception catches up. Scaling your success requires actively acknowledging the value you are already creating and letting your identity match your output. The lesson for the viewer is direct. The world operates on the principle of reciprocal exchange. You receive based on what you are willing to provide. Your participation is limited by the label you assign yourself. If you view yourself as having nothing to offer, you create a ceiling that no amount of effort can break through. You must deliberately choose a narrative that matches the reality you want to inhabit. Elevate your self-respect and define yourself by the value you intend to provide. Success follows the identity you choose to inhabit. The man's wealth grew only after he accepted the label of the person who could earn it.